I just wanted to kind of come on here onto Facebook Live today and do something that I have been thinking about doing for quite a few months, to be honest. I have been praying about this and thinking about this and talking about this and chickening out on this, and over the last few days I just figured out, you know what, it's time to finally do this and pull the trigger on this and just make this happen. And what I want to be doing is on every Friday, hopefully every Friday. My goal is every Friday, but it may go to every other Friday. But to do something called a leader lifter. I am an incredibly fortunate person. I recognize that. I'm in positions of leadership, not because of a huge sense of drive and a huge sense of ambition and climbing the corporate ladder and things like that. My entire career as a computer consultant, my entire career serving in nonprofits and charitable organizations and churches, I really believe has just been favor. And I have had the amazing opportunity to work in amazing companies and work in amazing churches and just have amazing leaders pour into my life to invest in me and to train me up and to teach me. And I have that heart to kind of give back what I've received. So the kind of the purpose of this leader lifter is to just be doing that, to kind of encourage you and to help you in whatever leadership position that you might be in. And I decided to put this onto my personal Facebook page instead of one of the groups I'm a part of, because I want this to be a little bit more generic. I don't want this to just be about church world. I also don't want this to be about hobby clubs and other different things I'm a part of, like denominations and things like that. I really want to try to keep this relatable to everybody, regardless of what your belief system would be, what your background is, and even what your position is. Because I believe as in the world today, we just need more leaders that are trustworthy across the board, in government, in military, in business, in our companies, and especially in our churches. And when I was kicking this idea around of doing these leader lifters, I've attempted this in many different ways over the years. For example, here at the church, I used to write, we send an email out every Friday morning, and I used to write a blurb at the beginning of that to kind of encourage people and give some vision and some direction and let people know what was going on. I've done blogging for years. I used to be a blogger long before blogging was cool. And so I was going back to those tools and trying to kick those off and get those off the ground. And what I realized is I'm a really bad writer. I just am. It takes for me to write out 3 paragraphs to get it in a way that's a good format, that's clear and precise and gets the point across that I wanted to share. It would take me half a day just to get those 3 or 4 paragraphs written. So I'm a talker by nature and a talker by profession, so I figured doing this in a video format would be a lot better. So the goal is to do these leader lifters every Friday, 12:30, and maximum 20 minutes, because I want to be respectful of your time. But I just want to share some different things that I have been learning through multiple sources and different ways that I have been trying to grow as a leader in the positions that I lead in. And if these are helpful and beneficial to you, I really hope and pray that they are. There are different ways that you'll be able to interact with this. If you want to post comments, because this is on Facebook Live, I can see any questions or comments that you'll have popping through this way, or you can just send me a message. You can send me an email. You can email me at kevin.presso@gmail.com and get questions to me that way. And maybe there's some topics that you're going through in your leadership as well, and we can look at this stuff and wrestle through it together, and hopefully just encourage one another in everything that we do to lead better. So in this first kind of leader lifter, I was thinking about this, and what really struck me, and I think this is just foundational on so many different areas of leading, is I want to talk today very briefly about values. I want to talk today about your personal values and maybe your values in your organization, whether that's a company that you own or a company that you work in, or your churches or nonprofits or charitable organizations, or even in your hobby groups and your sports teams. I want to talk about values. because I believe values are incredibly important, and it's not a topic that we get very deep into. We hear about it and we say, well, our values are important. But the reality is, if you look at the world around us, when you look at the leaders who fail, when you look at people who are making leadership decisions and they say their values is one thing, but when you actually look how they're living their lives, do their values actually show up in action? Do we actually see that playing out in the lives of leaders? And whether that's, again, government or business or churches, we can easily say, this is what I value. But our life shows something radically different. So I want to talk about the values and how you and I live them. Because I firmly believe that values will guide how you live. Let me say that again. Values will guide how you live. And they will guide what you do, and they will guide how you lead. And those values will be there for good or for bad. Like if you've got values that are selfish and prideful and egotistic, they're going to create those kind of responses, right? And so just kind of set this up just like in a way of personal values. Have you ever even thought of that? Have you ever sat down and spent 5 minutes thinking about, what do I truly value in life? I do that because I'm one of these kind of introspective kinds of people. I'm going every New Year's Eve, I'm reevaluating my life and looking at, how I'm doing and other areas of my life that I can grow and improve in. That's just kind of the type of guy that I am. And so I have thought about that for a number of years on what are my personal values when it comes to my leadership, whether that's in my church that I serve at or whether in any kind of organizations that I volunteer in. And two key values, again, not to sound boastful, these are just as examples when you explore what your values are. For me, the first and foremost one is to be real. That is an incredibly important value for me. When I first went into Christian leadership, I probably spent the first 3 years of my leadership trying to be somebody I wasn't. And that's partially because of my own insecurities, partially because of my feeling like I wasn't qualified or feeling like I was inadequate. And so I was constantly trying to be somebody else. Well, if only I could lead like that person. If only I could preach like that person. If only I could get people on board with our mission and our value and our strategic plan like these leaders. And I spent 3 years basically making myself absolutely miserable trying to be like these other people. But the other way that actually impacted me is then you also have a whole group of people around you who want you to be a certain type of leader. It's like, well, the former pastor used to do this. Or the former kind of leader of this, he used to do it that way. Or she used to do it that way. And we hear kind of this criticism. And because as leaders, we want people to be blessed. We want to encourage people. So we start giving in to the demands of that. And we find it actually just starts kind of killing our hearts when we do that. So for me, being real has been incredibly, incredibly important. I am who I am with all my faults and all my failures. And yes, I'm trying to strive and improving in those and growing in those each and every day. But I'm me. God, I believe, created me to be me, just like he created you to be you. Don't try to be me. Don't try to lead your organization the way I would. Don't try to volunteer the way I would. Be you. So being real is incredibly important to me, of being who I am, my personality type, my leadership style, the way I do things. Heck, even the fact that I'm doing this by video instead of trying to write this stuff down shows that this is just who I am. I'm just more comfortable talking to people than trying to write this down. I actually had a leader recently say, Kev, you're learning so many great things and the organization, your church is really growing and really vibrant. You should really be writing this down so you could put it in a book one day. And I just looked at them and said, it's just not going to happen. If I can bless other people through what we're learning, that's awesome. But it's never going to be a book because I hate writing. It's not who I am. So I like to be real. Another thing, just again as an example of the topic of a value for me personally, is I believe it's incredibly important to be generous. That's the way I try to live my life. I try to be generous in my time, making myself available for people. I try to be generous with my money and my resources, my home, and also generous with my knowledge. Again, I firmly believe that I the things that I learn and the ways that I grow, it's not just for my benefit. It's not just so I can be selfish and I can kind of, again, climb these ladders and become this huge person of influence. That's not the goal at all. I believe I learn things so that I can pass it on to others. I mean, there's again, whether you're watching this and you would say you're not a Christian or not, that's totally cool. I believe in those biblical principles that I have been blessed in order to be a blessing. I'm not trying to hoard this and hog this. So for me, being a person of generosity is incredibly important with my time, with my money, and with the knowledge that I learn. So this is why this Facebook Live thing started, because I just want to be able to pass on some of the stuff that I've learned. And so those values as examples are kind of guiding me in how I lead, and no matter where I'm leading. So what about you? Have you thought of your personal values and how your personal values are affecting your leadership, are affecting how you go about your job, how you go about your family, how you go about your volunteering in the community, whatever that looks like for you? Have you taken a few minutes to consider what are truly your values? And then, are you living by them? A couple of examples on this topic of why I believe values are so important, because if you are unable as an organization, as a church, as a nonprofit, if you are unable to articulate what your values are, you're going to spin around all over the place, thinking you might be doing a good job, but you're not truly aligned with who you are and the work that you're trying to do. And maybe in the case of churches, not even being the church that God has created you to be. Right? And so this is why this topic of values, I think, is important to look at this. And I'm just going to share a couple of examples of some work that we've been doing in different areas where I get the opportunity to lead, and show you how that value topic plays out. So let's just take church world, for example. I know some of you who are watching right now, it's great to have you here, are Christian. You're leading in churches, you're leading in missions, you're leading in different ministries, and it's very simple. It's very easy in church world to just kind of go, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is just how we do things here, or this is how the church up the road is doing it. We're really guilty of this one. The church up the road is growing, so we should just do what they are doing. Or if I just buy the right book, or if I just go to the right conference, then my church is going to grow, and we're going to have a greater impact in our community, in our city, and around the world. And we make those decisions without ever looking at our values. And we're surprised when this stuff worked over there but didn't work here. Well, it didn't work here because it's not a part of who you are. It's not a part of the value that you have, right? And again, values can be good or they could be bad. And sadly, in churches, I think sometimes we actually live out by some bad values, like the value of it's all about us. Like that we're going to huddle our resources, we're going to kind of stay closed-minded, we got to stay away from those scary people out in the world, and we close our doors. Well, being closed-minded is an incredibly bad value, and it's not the value of Jesus at all, right? So we can have bad values, but as an example, we have been working on our leadership team here as a church. We've been going through this topic of values, and we've been talking about this for months, and praying about this, and looking at it, and we're going to be making announcements about this over the next few weeks, but just one of them, I can kind of give a little bit of a spoiler here. One of the key values that we have determined as leaders that we hold, a value that we hold of incredible value, is to be relevant. As the church in our world today, we believe we are called to be relevant. Now, that doesn't mean changing what the Bible says. It doesn't mean watering it down. We will hold to the belief of what the Bible teaches, but in a way that is relevant, right? I remember a couple of years ago, I have two teenagers, and my teenagers were sitting in the back of my church, and I was preaching, because that's what I do on Sunday, and my kids are in the back of the church, and they got their phones out like this, and they're going like this. They're not listening to my sermon, they're looking at their cell phones that they got for Christmas, and when you're kind of standing in front of like 200 people, and you see your kids kind of not doing what they should be doing, it's like, man, I can't stop what I'm doing, but I'm gonna get them when we're in the car ride home. And so we're driving home, and I kind of look in my little rear view mirror, and I go to my kids, and they say, so, what was my sermon about today? And expecting them to go, well, I don't know, I wasn't listening, and I'm going to be like, ha, gotcha. Well, you know what they did? They both pulled out their phones and they showed me their notes. They were actually following along on our church app, and they were writing notes and the stuff that was speaking to their hearts, they were writing that down. And holy smokes, did I ever eat a lot of humble pie at that moment, right? So being relevant, that really struck for us as church leaders. So now when I tell people to take out their Bible, I'm not going to be a pastor who's going to stand in front of my congregation and say, please turn off your cell phones. Of course not. That's not relevant to the culture and the world that we live in today. If you're pastoring right now and you're telling people, put away your phone, you're not relevant. Most people have their Bible on this now, right? They don't come to church with a big honking paper Bible. Remember those leather cases that we used to buy, and we used to put our church bulletins in there and our highlighters and all that, and we were very proud of this big leather binder we would bring to church. Now on this, I've got 800 theology and church history books on my phone. So if we're telling people, turn off your phone, we're not relevant, right? So being relevant to our culture is incredibly important. Like if we are making decisions as leaders in our church that's actually pushing that away, then we know we're off track, right? Same thing with the topic of music. I mean, churches have been fighting for years when it comes to the topic of music. And we believe being relevant is an important value of who we are. So we have to make decisions around that. And if it means that we're going to err on the side of the music being more modern, that's where we're going to err, because we believe in being relevant in that kind of way, to be culturally relevant. We're not trying to create the church of the 2nd century, because we don't live in the 2nd century. We live in the 21st century, and we want to be leaders here in this context, in this culture. Because we can spend so much time as leaders fighting, especially in the church world. Wow, we hate this, we hate this, we hate this, we hate this. And that's not the goal, right? We can use these tools to reach people, to bless people, to minister to people, and we got to stop being afraid of these things. So this is just an example of why relevant. This became a core value, and it drives what we do. It drives what we do. We can't say we're relevant if we're still arguing about music. We can't say we're relevant if we're telling people to put away their phones. We can't say we're relevant if it's not actually connecting with the world around us. So that's one example. Another great example is I have the privilege of volunteering in a worldwide cosplay group, and we raise money for children's charities, a part of that. And one of the core values of that organization is the core value of community. In fact, it's their first one. Their core in the big statement, the core thing is community. And how that value can play out in that organization is absolutely huge, because it's very easy in a worldwide volunteer club to put systems and processes and people and ideas into place which are actually breaking down community. It happens all the time. So if you put something in place that's a really great idea, but it actually pushes people away from being in community, you're failing in your mission because you're going against the value, right? So when I kind of became a leader of this thing, it's like I've got to do everything possible to foster up community. We started doing live updates like this to get people engaged. We started holding once a month evenings just to get people together and hang out and swap stories and swap ideas in order to create community. You can't say community is your value if you never speak to anybody, right? If you're saying community is your value and you're not talking to anybody, you don't value community. You can't say you value community if you're running things like a dictator and just slamming your foot down and bashing everybody and bashing every idea under the sun. No, because you're trying to create community. So again, these are just a couple of examples of why I believe values are so incredibly important for each and every one of us as leaders. So what I want you to do is take some time over the course of this week, and I would love to hear your comments or your feedback on this. Again, you can just put it as a comment in the bottom of this video, or you can send me an email again, kevin.presso@gmail.com. And I want you to ask yourself this. Let's say if you have a full-time job or a part-time job in an organization, do you know what your organization's values are? Do you even know that? I know here in my church, most people don't know what they are. And that's why we spend so much time as leaders working on it, because it's important. It drives what we do. So do you know what your organization's values are? Second question I want you to ask yourself is, do you have personal values? And do you know what your personal values are? Again, because you can sit there and say, I value this, I value that, but it's not really true. Like, you can sit there and say, hey, I value family. And you're working late every night, and you're working 60 hours a week, you're never spending any time with your spouse, you're never spending any time with your children. Guess what? You don't value family. Sounds great to say it, but if you're not living it, it's not a value, right? And then the third question I want you to ask, third question I want you to ask is, do you live by these values as a leader? And not only do you live out these values as a leader, are you willing to fight for these values in your family, in your life, or in your organization? Because that's the call of being a leader. The call of being a leader is to protect those values, because they define your organization, they define who you are and how you are living out that mission in wherever you are in the world. So again, hopefully I'm going to be doing these leader lifters every week, but at the minimum they'll be every other Friday. But the goal is for the next season I've got a lot of material that I want to go through, so I've been jotting down a lot of stuff in my little red book here. So I hope this is helpful. And again, just put some comments below, if there's any way I can be praying for you, I'm always glad to do so. Please put a comment below, or send me an email again at kevin.presso@gmail.com. And I just pray that you will continue to just lead really well. We need it, we need it, we need it. We need more people leading out of their values and watching the world around us become a more loving and better place. And especially if you're a Christian, if you're a church leader, we need it even more. We need it even more. Be the values of Jesus in our world today. And I pray that God would do immeasurably more in you or through you than you could even ask or imagine. So God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.